It's a lovely Saturday for some Big Four analysis. In today's video, we're going to be going over Solana, Ethereum, XRP, and Bitcoin. Not necessarily in that order, but we'll start it off right over here with Solana. And let's continue on with this very long-term view. Now, if you recall, about 3 weeks ago, we started to look at the weekly timeframes for all of these big ones. And Ethereum, Solana, and Bitcoin were the ones that were suggesting, hey, something new is going on, led by Solana. And in this case, Solana did have a pretty nasty monthly closure. I do suspect, however, that coming into March, there will very likely be a bounce on all of these things. But for Solana, I would say that the top of the bounce range is going to be likely somewhere around about 170. So, if things do get around there, I would be looking at that as very likely a pushback point. And when we look at the higher term timeframes, of which it is the first day of March, we can see that March has opened up with its first real twist to the downside, losing the bullish control zone on the monthly stochastic oscillator. So a very, very high term time frame here. And that pivot, the pivot for momentum on the monthly, has shifted significantly now to the upside. If you recall from yesterday's video, or yesterday was a live stream, so we did cover this, but Solana was pivoted at 227, now going all the way up to almost 250. So I do look at this as, the real chance for this thing to break down. Maybe it doesn't happen in March, probably April, if it doesn't, but after a bit of an opening bounce to, let's say, somewhere around 170, I would be looking for this one to kind of push back. And long term, I do suspect that this one will see somewhere back down around at least 100. And if things get really crazy, 85. Things are, obviously reversing here. Of course, this also comes in alignment with the last major high. So this really starts to look like obviously it's a massive swing high position, but this is a swing high on a monthly, right? So things can come down significantly further. Again, after a bounce, and a bounce to 170 from here is a big fucking move, right? Perhaps it does retest, just below 140 once again. Yesterday's open, but ultimately somewhere around 170 would be more than a 20% bounce. So that perhaps is tradable. But again, that's just another lower high. So that is kind of where I would be looking for on a failure. Of course, we can draw some fibs as well, just see what other areas of interest there might indeed be. Yeah, the 382 is kind of where that 170 is. It's a little bit higher, 174 and a half. 50% retracement level is 193. So I'd be looking at that as a significant pivot. As long as Solana is below there, I am going to be bearish and looking for further continuation of the downside. Again, on the more long-term look of this one. And I wouldn't even, if Solana got back above 193, I wouldn't be immediately bearish. I would just be looking at this as potential. But, for right now, Solana needs to prove itself because the bears have taken control here, at least from the way that I look at things. Now, moving on to XRP. XRP, as we went over in last week's video, is the one thing that is the only one of the big four that looks different, really, completely in structure. You can see XRP here is still above all major moving averages. Compare that with Solana, which is testing already the 21, the yellow moving average right here, and certainly closed well below the red moving average. So, that one is weak compared to XRP. And by the way, we'll do the comparison analysis between Solana and Ethereum a little bit later. But for right now, again, XRP showing a different picture here. And so I actually would say for XRP, I should not get super bearish on this as long as it's above the monthly 5 exponential, which is about $2 again on a closing basis. Monthly momentum will actually continue to the upside here, assuming that XRP can remain above 170. But let's go down to the lower term timeframes and see, if there's anything a little bit more hidden in this picture. And yeah, there is a very obvious consolidation range. That being about these lows. Oops. Okay, let me just do it for this time frame. Perhaps that'll be more useful. These lows right here versus the last lower high, which you saw right here. As long as it's between this region, I guess, could have, a more bullish interpretation of this one. It does feel weird to say that, certainly for XRP, just because in the past it's really taken every chance on every rally to fail. But in this case, have to respect the monthly. So I'd say this is the one out of the big four that looks different. Of course, that is a warning signal in and of itself, because how often do you see something different amongst the big four? Like almost never, basically. So I would say that probably does. That probably is a warning signal. If I look at the weekly here, yeah, weekly momentum is coming down hard after hitting extremes on volatility as well. Will remain to the downside as long as XRP is below 116 or so. And also is very likely about to break this trendline regression, assuming that there is not a rally above 315 by the closure tomorrow for the weekly. But as it stands right now, if I look at the weekly, this one really does look like a head and shoulders right here. With your left derp, your head, and your right derp over here. So that would be kind of the other view on this one, but of course not really playable until we see either below February's lows or a closure on a weekly below about 190. If you see one of those two things, okay, yeah, the monthly will fail. It'll join the rest of the market. Next target would be somewhere around 1.25. Bounces along the way as well, of course, but I did want to offer up this other side of it just because it is a really concerning thing to me when I see everything else looks different and this one is giving different signals. So yeah, but again, until that happens, I guess like my rule is that I can't be higher term time frame bearish until you're below that red 5 exponential on a closing basis. So of course, more aggressive people will have, I guess, a little bit more of an aggressive read than that, and probably already be looking at this one as likely to fail. But just like Solana is likely to open up March with a bounce, I would suspect that XRP does the same. Could easily pop back up around $2.50. Doesn't really do anything for it. Of course, this one, if it is a head and shoulders, then this right shoulder right here, which is at 283.5, it is a major pivot, meaning that if XRP can get a back above that pivot, that would be bullish confirmation to me. So that's kind of where I'd stand on this one. Anyways, moving on, we have Ethereum here. Ethereum continues to fail its monthly momentum pivot. It's had so many chances in the past 4 months now where it was very, very close, a very reasonable momentum pivot for the monthly. Now it has failed yet again, which was 2,900 for yesterday. The momentum pivot for March is going to be about the same, just below 2,900, but you can see it is nosediving here, losing not just the bullish control zone, but also the neutral zone as well. So it's going to be making its first attempt into the bearish control zone since 2022, June of 2022. Not only that, but Ethereum did close on a monthly lower low. If we go to a line chart right here and we look just at the facts on this one, highs about the same. Yeah, it's technically a slightly lower high, but I don't really consider it like that. But it is certainly a lower low here compared to the September 2024 low. So to me, again, that is a bad signal, making lower lows alongside momentum making, just continuing to the downside, I guess. Ethereum just, again, takes every fucking shot, every fucking opportunity. You get one shot and one opportunity, and Ethereum just shit the bed on all of them, I think. This fucking cursed coin. Anyways, I do want to revisit that the higher term timeframes are all, I believe, in the same direction. We see the monthly with downside momentum. We see the bi-weekly with downside momentum. We see the weekly with downside momentum below 3,100. The 10-day also downside below 3250. 5-day downside as long as below 2570. 3-day also freshly down below 2550. 2-day also down into the bearish control zone below 25, and the daily also going to be down below 2350. So does Ethereum open up March on a bounce? Probably. I think that a lot of these things are just due for bounces after being beat up so fucking much. But if it bounced up to like 2,500, that doesn't really do anything for me. Again, this one has a nice healthy downtrend as long as it's especially below, let's call it 2,900, again, on a closing basis. So it can rally up, all the way to 2,800 even, and that'd still be another lower high. So I would be still cautious on this one. But I do suspect that, similar to Solana, it will very likely bounce at the beginning of this month. And if I had to give a bounce target on it, I'd say somewhere around these two moving averages. You can see Ethereum is currently resting on the 55, but the red and the yellow, which is the 5 and the 21 respectively, are pretty much both about the same at 2670. So I'd have a keen eye on that region. That is a very, very likely pushback point for Ethereum for this month after a bit of a short-term rally. And then, if it came back down to the lows, that would be confirmation to me that this thing is literally getting ready to begin a monthly trend to the downside. It sounds really crazy right now, to be honest. But yeah, I guess the bullish view, similar to Solana, would be that it just holds this range between the 21 and the 55 for this month. I guess that kind of keeps bullish hopes alive if that were to happen, but it's going to be a long fucking month here. And I expect that there's going to be tests both ways. Anyways, let me take a sip of this water, which I've infused with sodium and creatine, actually. It's kind of helping with my massive jet lag. I still feel about 69% retarded right now, but that is what it is. Better than usual, I guess. And now let's look at Solana versus Ethereum pairing. So this one, we called a reversal on it. I believe this was like a month ago now. Yeah, back in January. I still think that this one is reversing here. I do think that Ethereum will gain versus Solana. So Solana is very likely the weaker between the two. But again, just because Ethereum gains versus Solana, meaning that this chart comes down, doesn't mean that they're going to go up versus US dollar. It just means Ethereum might go down, not go down as much as Solana. But yeah, I guess it would be slightly better at this point. And I'm looking at this one as topped as long as it's below 0.08. And we can see monthly momentum again coming down hard here, about to lose the bullish control zone if it doesn't have any sort of heroic reclaim, above that 0.08 region by end of month here. And I suspect that this one, long term, again, still very, very likely comes down at least to here. And I wouldn't even be surprised if it came all the way down here, which would be a massive differential from where it's at right now. That is like a 50% move for the lower, for the lower boundary. So I would be expecting Ethereum to do better than Solana in the upcoming months. Anyways, let's also look at Ethereum versus Bitcoin, and then we'll look at Bitcoin as well. But Ethereum versus Bitcoin monthly closed not as good as I think what many people hope for, but I still think that this is in a bounce territory right here. Does it retest the lows again or not? Who the fuck knows? But I do expect that this one will see a rally sometime between now and April at around 3.1 million Satoshis, and very likely plays at a range for a while between this pivot and this pivot right here. That would be about 3.2 million Satoshis to the upside. Maybe that gets adjusted down a little bit towards 3.1. But to the downside, 2.3 million Satoshis. I just don't think that this is going to break down first without having, a pretty decent bounce. We can see that monthly momentum actually did not fulfill its needed criteria to cross the upside. However, I do think that it's very likely you will see it happen this month. Again, just needs to close above 0.2.5 million Satoshis about. And it's above there right now, but this is literally the first fucking day of the month. So can't really make too much out of that. Anyways, let's now end on Bitcoin. So if you recall, over the past couple of days, we were looking for a bounce off of that white moving average, the 200 simple. Yesterday had me a little bit concerned because Bitcoin was so below it intraday. But again, it really only matters where things close at the end of the day, and it did certainly heroically reclaim that moving average. So I'd still look at this as very likely a bounce phase right here. Again, in the very, very short term, can Bitcoin retest around the 200 simple at like 82,000 or so? Sure, yeah, but that doesn't really that really doesn't destroy anything for me. If it did, I'd just still be looking at this as a bounce region, and very likely does get a try up into the deeper 80s. I would say 87 to 88,000 bucks, very, very likely. And if things do get crazy, well, let's see where our fibs are. I guess 90,000 bucks is 618, so it's not that bad. But I would be bearish on this one, I guess, for March after a bounce, as long as it's below the 786 here, which is 94,750. Even if Bitcoin did get around there, that would still be a lower high, but ultimately that, I guess, would open up the possibility of this actually just creating a range for the next couple months. And I think that would be the bullish view on this, is that you're going to see a range for the next few months coming into into the end of the first half of this year. And then if it holds between these two major regions, then I'd be looking at that as actually a pretty damn good sign that Bitcoin, is going to reaccumulate within this region without going lower. But for right now, like I said, I think that this one does bounce. I think that you will see a high somewhere around this region here, probably like 88, 89,000 bucks. And if it turns back down towards the $80,000 region from there, I would still have to say the monthly is concerning here. The monthly did close below the red moving average, not by a whole hell of a lot, but it certainly did. And that is now at 86,500 essentially. So as long as Bitcoin's below there on a monthly closing basis, I do have to be looking lower. This is going to be in combination with monthly bearish divergence. And on top of that, we do see that the monthly momentum is turning down on the monthly, which will be headed down as long as Bitcoin's below 101,900. And the bi-monthly time frame, which also just closed last night, is going to be headed to the downside as long as Bitcoin's below 91,000 bucks. So I guess 91 as a pivot for the end of April would also be relevant here too. But I do think that this is worth discussing right here because it is quite concerning to me. The bi-monthly chart has actually been really fucking good on its twist to the downside for momentum in getting major cycle highs. In the first couple cycles right here, it worked just about perfectly for 2014 and 2017. Now, more recently, I would say this was certainly not a perfect iteration of it, although still, once it did turn down, Bitcoin retested around that prior high. It certainly did not make any new highs on a closing basis on these higher term timeframes. So, effectively it was saying that this was the high, and I would agree with that. So that is also concerning to me as well. I think at minimum, we're going to see a test down to the 5 exponential at some point during this month. Again, that would just be ever so slightly south of 80,000 bucks. So I guess a little bit closer to 79,000 bucks. But I think that's probably where I should leave it off for Bitcoin. Maybe actually, hold on. Let's actually bring up the HPDR. I'm very curious to see where the monthly range did evolve to. Okay, it actually shifted down here. Wow, that would be very, very bad. Even the median is coming down to 93,800, 93,500. 93,650 actually. So, I guess theoretically could be a bounce all the way up to even there. But as long as you're below there, I do have to be looking at this one as likely to come back down to the lower end of this range in the next coming months. At least that would be the time to be looking for a move like that alongside momentum oscillators, also suggesting to the downside as well. And a pretty emphatic rejection right here of the median for February. I mean, that tells me to change around, pretty much all my ideas. Maybe not pretty much all my ideas, but certainly most of my ideas in the higher term timeframes. And I just wanted to wrap up this video with one last thing because I've gotten a lot of questions about this. I think maybe it's been misheard. Maybe I didn't do the best job of explaining. I mean, it's certainly possible when I'm massively jet lagged. Oh, fuck. Before I get into that, let's also go over these as well. The meta signal setup, I just wanted to follow up on these. We called out the 2-hour setup. This was on yesterday's video, I believe. And by the way, you can get these setups and these signals for free in the link in the description below for Meta Signals. They also have their product service, whatever you want to call it, available too, which this one doing pretty damn good, I'd say. This one opened up at about 85,800. It does look like target 2 has already been hit. I mean, this is obviously the same screenshot that I had from yesterday. Target number 2 has been hit. That's about a 50% probability. Target number 3 is at 90,200. That does have about a 30% probability, but I guess possible in this case. Now, here's the thing. The Meta Signals algo has actually fired off another setup right here. This one looks very similar, as you can see, but this is actually a 3-hour time frame. This one fired off at 86,000 bucks and having a stop loss on a close below about 85 in this case, which Bitcoin's actually getting quite close to right now, to be fair, but has, I believe, already hit target number 1. Target number 2 is 89,600. That has a hit rate around 50%, and target number 3 actually very much in line with the past target number 3, just below 91,000 bucks. Again, that's lower probability, about 30% or so, maybe a little bit under 30%. Anyways, okay, so where was I? Yes, reiterating my thoughts on this cycle. So with the way that things are going, I do think that Bitcoin in March, if it is going to break down, like this would make sense after a bounce. So I do think that Bitcoin bears are kind of in control here. And if there is going to be, a real shift in the market cycle, then it's going to get confirmed this month, and we'd be expecting Bitcoin back down into like the mid 60s, let's say, if that does indeed happen. But for argument's sake, people have been asking, what is like the bullish view of Bitcoin right now? And I think I kind of said it a little bit earlier, and I do think that this is very much possible, but the bullish view in my eyes is that Bitcoin actually still does come down a little bit from where it's currently at least retests last month's low and probably makes a slightly new low. But ultimately, Bitcoin on a monthly closing basis would remain above about $76,000 and continue with a range for the next, let's say, like I said, until about the end of the first half of this, of this year. So that would be until June. Continues with a range between about mid 70s to the downside versus about $90,000 to the upside. And if we see something like that, that would be a really good sign to me, and that would also imply that the cycle is lengthened, or at least there's going to be another try maybe around the end of this year. Does that try make a new all-time high or not? I don't fucking know, but that would be certainly a tradable move, I would suspect. I mean, from 70 even to $100,000, I mean, that's a big fucking move. But yeah, I suppose we'll see. So anyways, I think that's a good place maybe leaving off on this video. We'll continue to update on the higher term time frame look, of course, each and every week. If you do find this content valuable, consider subscribing. And also, I will be signing off on that note. So take care, much love, and see you hopefully tomorrow.